Namaste everybody, I'm Cam. Welcome to thefoundationmethod.com. I'm the host of the program, and today we're exploring a little bit more on mental health, mental hygiene section, and I've affectionately termed today's one Perfectionism, a thief of natural joy and self-expression. So that led me onto a conversation with a couple of friends who said that there's positive perfectionism, and then I had my own experience where I really suffered with perfectionism and it kept me in a very unhealthy mental frame. So I decided to dive a little bit deeper into it. So my conversation with Rochelle, one of my friends and colleagues, is where this whole thing started. And she was saying, you know, when you grow up and you're taught to keep going with anything that you succeed at, not just to do, you know, activities for self-fulfillment or joy, but only if you see yourself having a long-term relationship with that and an outcome that surrounds winning. And she said that she loves painting, dancing and singing, but she wouldn't do them unless she was the best, or if it wouldn't get her anywhere in life, or perceived to get her anywhere in life, or if she couldn't do them perfectly. And she was saying even with her yoga practice, that was one of the big limitations that stopped her from moving forward, because she felt pressure to do it perfectly. And if you'd seen Rochelle, you'd know that there is not much imperfect about her practice. So it's obviously an internal observation and self-judgment. So that led me on to my own reflections around it, and I certainly suffered from unhealthy perfectionism. And then talking to my partner, who has the need for perfectionism in her job, as she's a dentist, and she's quite correctly said, you wouldn't want to have your dentist as not a perfectionist. You want somebody in the medical field to have a really acute eye for detail and a strive for perfectionism. So that led me to explore a little bit deeper, and today I'm going to look into what is perfectionism. Are there different styles of perfectionists? Where does it come from? Am I a perfectionist? So a little bit of a self-diagnosis. What is unhealthy perfectionism, and is it hurting me? How is perfectionism treated? And styles of therapy and some self-help strategies if you are suffering from unhealthy perfectionism. So let's get into it. So firstly, Wikipedia, I always like to start there because, you know, it's very accessible for everybody. Perfectionism is psychologically a broad personality style characterized, I should say, by persons concerned with striving for flawlessness and perfection, and accompanied by critical self-evaluations and concerns regarding others' evaluations. So that's your Wikipedia definition. I liked this one from goodtherapy.org. Perfectionism is often defined as the need to be or to appear perfect, or even believe that it's possible to achieve perfectionism. It's typically viewed as a positive trait rather than a flaw. People may use the term healthy perfectionism to describe or justify perfectionistic behaviors. Now, I really like that little definition if we unpack that a little bit there, because firstly, it says that it can be viewed as a positive trait. So that's not saying it is positive, but it can be viewed as a positive trait by the person who's exhibiting perfectionistic behaviors. So my work with Dr. John Nutting encourages the moving away from black and white thinking. So instead of saying somebody is a perfectionist, you could say they have perfectionistic behaviors, and that allows us to kind of look at it in much more of a rainbow or a sliding scale, which is a much healthier way of sort of diving into the topic. And then Brené Brown, who I love her work. She's a writer, a researcher, and a professor at the University of Houston. She distinguishes between perfectionism and healthy perfectionism, or healthy behavior. She says perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is about healthy achievement and growth. She explains that perfectionism is used by many people as a shield to protect against pain, blame, judgment, or shame. So it's clear then, when we have a look at three different definitions, that there is potential for this to be a healthy or a positive trait, and potentially damaging as well, using to sort of mask or avoid feelings that we might be going through, or things that we've been sort of programmed with in our past. So let's look a little bit deeper. Are there differing styles of perfectionism? So 3 main ones that I'll speak to. So the first one is personal standards perfectionism. Second one is self-critical perfectionism. That was me. And the third one is socially prescribed perfectionism. So there's your doctors, your dentists, etc. So the first one, personal standards perfectionism. So I look at this as like connected to your inner purpose, personal achievable values. So notice that I said achievable there. Your bottom lines, if you're in a recovery program, things you're trying to abstain from, your no-go zones, or your code of ethics. So that's the way, very simply, that I'll lean into this one. And this is kind of regarded as the more healthy approach to perfectionism. So someone who practices this type might adhere to a set of standards that motivate them. Others might still consider these standards to be high, but they are motivated by the person who sets them. This type of perfectionism is thought to be healthy, and it doesn't lead to excessive stress or burnout. And people with personal standards perfectionism may be less likely to use harmful habits to cope with stress brought on by perfectionism. And they often say that they feel energized or uplifted by this personal style of perfectionism. So if you're very ethics bound, you're striving to work within certain internal guidelines that drive your direction and your decisions in life, this is what this one's more speaking to. And certainly in the conversations that I've had with people that lean into more of a healthy connection with this, maybe they were brought up with very strong attachment with their parents, or guided by a very clear and loving attachment to religion or spirituality. They might have had those connections in their upbringing, and they tend to lean into this particular style if that's something that they identify with. The next one, self-critical perfectionism. So stairway to the spiral. You see my pretty little picture here. So this is how it was explained to me when I went and hung out with a psychologist in the Blue Mountains who worked a lot with PTSD rehabilitation with soldiers, and explained to me what I was suffering with at that time. And so if you can see my little diagram here, you've got these little stairways, and there's an arrow that goes up to infinity, because it's pointing to perfectionism as a continual thing that's always out of your reach. It's never actually attained. So that was my self-critical perfectionism. Nothing was ever good enough, right? And then what happens is you get to the top of the stairway and you run out of energy and you burn out, and then the spiral happens. So I call this one the stairway to the spiral. And the spiral is all the negative unhealthy patterns, your addictions, negative self-talk, judgment, self-sabotage. And then once you're, starting to fill up your energy again, you go back on the stairway and try and climb towards perfection, which doesn't actually exist. And if we look at it in a very yogic way, perfection only exists in the soul or the spirit, or that spark of infinite that's within us. And it's beyond our perception of our 5 senses, and it's not in the physical world which we're perceiving. So anything that you can perceive in the yogic world is in continual change. And in the sort of Vedic tradition of unity consciousness, the only thing that they really talk to as being perfect is that thing that is aware of everything, or the universe itself. So that's the yogic perspective of perfection. So therefore it can never really be achieved. It can only be experienced. So this self-critical perfectionism, going on with that, type of perfectionism is more prone to becoming intimidated by the goals that they set for themselves rather than feeling motivated. They might more often feel hopeless, or that their goals will never become reality. Research suggests that self-critical perfectionism is more likely to lead to negative emotions such as distress, avoidance, anxiety, self-condemnation. And there's the spiral to the stairway to the spiral burnout example that I've given you there. And the other thing I should say about that is the reason that the spiral downward happens is because on the pursuit for perfection, which again doesn't ever really exist, you burn out, you run out of energy, and then something comes along, a real life issue, and because you don't have any energy in the tank, it knocks you off center, and that's where that spiral of negative behavior starts happening or shows up. So the next one there is socially prescribed perfectionism. So this is your dentists, your doctors, your lawyers, all that type of characters that need a high level of attention to detail for their work. So, very fine, precise motor skills, or, the depth of focus and an awareness to handle a 6 or 8 hour legal battle in court, or 10-hour surgery. And really, I feel like this socially prescribed perfectionism needs a lot of help and support within our community, and we really need to up-level our care for our health professionals, and give them a lot more support out there, and access to mental health support, as well as legal protection and in job support, to rotate through the roles so that then they can actually be human and just focus on the attention to detail. But that's, again, my personal opinion. Outlined in 2014, the York University study, this type of perfectionism describes a demand for excellence often placed on people with jobs that require extreme precision. So individuals in these professions experienced more hopelessness thoughts, stress, high risk, self-harm, suicide, etc. So that's because our society doesn't want to allow them to be human beings and make an error. And of course, we want them to have that attention to detail. But it's something that's worth exploring on a deeper, more legal frame conversation at some stage. So the next one here is, where does it come from? So where does perfectionism arise, healthy or unhealthy? So frequent fear of disapproval from others, or feelings of insecurity and inadequacy. So if you grew up in a very competitive family, competitive school, very judgmental, very harsh, maybe it was religion, maybe it's just your culture, or the suburb that you grew up. If you grew up with a lot of fear, that might start to bring out that perfectionism, or fear of weakness or fear of failure. But it's very fear driven. This whole thing's very fear driven. Mental health issues like anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder. So it's not a joke. We used to joke, perfectionism. Oh, he's got the OCD, stack the blocks the wrong way in the yoga studio, or whatever's going on there. And we used to joke about it being, oh, don't aggravate my OCD. But medical studies say that, you might be a perfectionist and not have OCD, or you might be OCD and not be a and have perfectionism. So there is a correlation, but they can be mutually exclusive. Having a parent who exhibits perfectionistic behaviors and expresses disapproval for their children's efforts, when their children's efforts do not result in perfection. So if you've got really judgmental parents, this is a classic setup. And the work that John Nutting does in the balancing core beliefs, like we explore going into that stuff. So if you balance your core belief, then one of the side effects is you might find some of this black and white style thinking of perfectionism might just start to balance itself out and either remain in a healthy way if your job demands, but certainly lighten the load, which is what we're looking for. And insecure early attachment in childhood. So people who had a troubled childhood or troubled attachment, being left alone too much when you're a kid, or growled at a little bit too much, or feeling insecure as to whether the parent was going to be there. Again, that's kind of the setup for those unbalanced core beliefs that you can sort out in the core belief balancing work that myself and John do. Am I a perfectionist? How do I know? Am I just, having a little perfectionistic behavior, or am I getting lost down the rabbit hole? So most people engage in perfectionism from time to time in different areas of your life. So it's important to realize that, we might all do these things, but do we suffer from it? Is it healthy? That's the big question. So not being able to perform a task unless they know they can do it perfectly. So this goes back to the chat that I had with Rochelle. I call this the freeze syndrome. So this is where you don't bother doing it anyway. And I have suffered from this. Unless you can do it perfectly. Doesn't allow you to be a work in progress, and it inhibits you actually trying something new. So that's definitely a negative side effect. View the end product as the most important part of your undertaking. As a result, they may focus less on the process of learning or completing a task to the best of their ability. So end gaming something. Problem when you're learning something new, especially, and I can talk to this in the regard of the beginner's mind, which is a Zen Buddhist concept, and I'll give you some links in the notes if you want to explore this a bit more. It means that studying something with the perspective of a beginner, the excitement and the energy of somebody who's doing it for the first time and really wants to learn it, and maintaining that energy and focus even at an expert level is going to avail you more potential for finding more perspectives on the certain subject at hand. You can learn it more, you can evolve it more. So beginner's mind, and also not end gaming what it is that you're going into, which makes it kind of like a singular result, as opposed to coming up with the best result. So not see a task as finished until the result is perfect according to their standards. I see this all the time in musicians. I work in the music industry as well, and I see musicians that have this incredible, amazing talent, and there's all these unfinished songs, and it's because they feel like it's not finished, and they keep playing with it, and they keep playing with it to the point where they break the original idea. So keep it simple, stupid. That's kind of my advice there. Like, if it's a creative project that you're embarking on, just, get it, put it out there and move on. Procrastination. Some people with perfectionism may not want to begin a task until they know they can do it perfectly. Goes back to that conversation again with Rochelle. The block of not doing something. Some people might call this writer's block. And I had a conversation with Nick Cave when I was serving him in at the restaurant, and I was experiencing writer's block in my music career. And he said, mate, people call it lots of different things. Maybe you're drinking too much. Maybe you're scared of success. Maybe you're just too lazy. But whatever it is, once you get the opportunity and the motivation to get in there and write, just write a lot. And it was good advice because it kind of got me over the fear hurdle. And then I found a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way. So if you are struggling with perfectionism or your process, jump into The Artist's Way. I'll give you a link in the comments as well, because that was a really transformative process into helping me get moving with my endeavors out of procrastination and writer's block. And people who take an excessive amount of time to complete a task that doesn't typically take others that long to complete. Yeah, I used to work with a guy who would spend like 2 or 3 hours on one Instagram post. Everything had to be perfect, and it was painstaking to watch. And literally life was just floating by, and it was like, well, maybe it's not 100% perfect, but life's too short. So yeah, things that usually take other people blink of an eye. If you're laboring over it for hours and hours and hours to life's distraction, then that's probably a good example of unhealthy perfectionism, or you're leaning too much into those perfectionistic behaviors. So why is unhealthy perfectionism hurting me? So progress versus perfection, a spiritual approach. I call this the pendulum effect, right? So you're fighting so hard to look perfect on paper because you have this low sense of self-worth, but you hate yourself in the process, distancing yourself from everybody in isolation. So if you're in addiction recovery, isolation is a really great place to grow your addiction, and you can end up in a relapse. So it's really dangerous behavior for addicts. So the idea that because perfectionism you feel that if I look perfect on paper, I, do the right thing by everyone around me, I please everyone around me, I'm always very generous to my own detriment. I think of everyone else first, but my cup is empty and my resentments are growing, and therefore my sense of self-worth is diminishing, and the diminishing self-worth and the resentment's growing is a spectacular relapse for anybody that's in recovery, and very dangerous. They say one of the number one killers of alcoholics isn't alcohol, as it seems pretty obvious, but it's actually resentment. So that unhealthy attachment to perfectionism in addiction circles, they speak, progress, not perfection, as the guide, and I really connected with that in my own recovery story. And the other point of that is that it allows room when I relax that perfectionism. I can be more honest with what's going on with me, which means I've got a better chance of getting well. And beyond that, it allows space for the grace of the universe to come on in and create changes within me that I couldn't have done with my conscious mind, or I couldn't have done by myself. So that's if you're working a 12-step program. The thief of natural joy and self-expression. So this is the freeze effect. So when it disables you from trying to do something new, fear of failure, I've put in here, just dance, God damn it. So get out there and move. So I, grew up doing dance routines, break dance routines. They had to be perfect. But then I experienced dancing for self-fulfillment and joy. I used to be a podium dancer at the raves, and still work in that scene these days, and always remind myself to tap into that inner joy of just following my bliss in the movement, in the moment, and getting really present. And then that kind of pulls me out of the perfectionism, which I feel so much attached to fear. So when I let that go and just be really present with experiencing my joy and following my bliss and really committing to the process that I'm going through, that perfectionism tends to subside, and I get that intensely present experience, which means that it might look a lot more graceful and a lot more precise than if I was trying, or it might not, but that doesn't matter, because that's not the point. The point is to invest in that process just for the joy of it, right? Self-expression based experience allows me to lose myself, my ego, in the intense presence of the experience, and it becomes like a meditation. So getting really present within the experience that I'm enjoying really just helps me move away from that fear. So how is perfectionism treated? So number one, we can do therapy. So, and there's lots of different therapies that you could do there. But typically the therapy focuses on treating issues that led the person to develop the perfectionistic qualities, like fear of failure, desire to be loved or admired, people pleasing, the need to please your parents, or an attachment to that, perfectionism from your family drives. And so different therapies you could do cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and yoga is the original CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Especially if you sort of, have a read through the Patanjali Sutras, you'll see that that's very much about shifts in perspective to give you a practice to find that self-realization. So really anything that creates self-awareness training is really useful here, just to be able to observe yourself as you're going into those perfectionistic behaviors. Family systems theory, or family of origin theory, or John Nutting's core belief balancing. Very similar stuff here. So going into understanding the makeup that you went through in your family and how it grew these patterns inside of you, and then finding ways to balance it. So that's that emotional gym work that I mentor, as well as John Nutting has a really beautiful tool of balancing those out of balance core beliefs that were created to help me survive in my family of origin. And hypnotherapy. So I did some hypnotherapy with, I did some of Rick Collingwood's hypnotherapy CDs when I was up in the Blue Mountains with the psychologist that I was seeing, and they were really, really useful. So they really helped me get in touch with a sense of natural joy, helped me boost up my self-esteem, and so that then I could make better decisions. So that's a really nice way of doing it as well. And 12-step recovery. So a 12-step program is going to help you, let go and let God, one step at a time, first things first, take it easy. You'll hear all these slogans that you see on the wall in a 12-step meeting, and they really work. They really guide us to handing our will over to a higher power and then allowing that to flow through us. So we're guided by a higher perspective, and then we're also helped. Our thinking is helped to be mentored by an older sober member who can help us get good, healthy perspective. So peer-to-peer based recovery. So 10 self-help strategies for perfectionism, not 10 of them, just this is my number 10. So if perfectionistic thinking is causing you stress, there are steps you can take to work forward and healing your own. So the first one, challenge your black and white thinking or your all or nothing thoughts. Remind yourself that one slip doesn't ruin the process. So again, I see this in recovery circles. People sober and they have a slip and then they spiral and go out of control and they hate themselves and then back at the beginning again. I've heard people say treat it like a cricket score, or just because you've had a stumble doesn't mean that it's all fallen down. Don't sabotage it. John Nutting is really big mentoring about trying not to attach to that black and white thinking, because what you resist persists. So one of the traps of black and white thinking is that you might be trying to grow in this direction, but because it polarized your thoughts, you can end up building up the opposite energy and being back in the mess that you wanted to try and get away from. And so being able to see more perspective, the rainbows of options there, again, that beginner's mind practice or process is really good to engage in. So write down or journal any positive affirmations about yourself in the area or the areas of your most perfectionistic. I like to set reminders on my phone so they come up random times of the day, especially around about 3 o'clock when I'm getting deep into my office work. Be aware of your self-talk. So a lot of this you can see it's self-awareness training, and this is stuff that I'll take you through in the foundation method. So taking you through yoga training and the core belief balancing stuff. Anything that grows your self-awareness is going to help you through this stuff here. So you can really see cognitively whether it's healthy or whether it's not for you. So, and then also getting in tune with your emotions and your feelings around it. Like, does it give you that sense of freedom, that uplifted feeling, a sense of achievement, or is it giving you that real gritty, tight knot in the tummy, making you feel heavy and weighed down? Try a new hobby. So this is the beginner's mind and play. So choosing a hobby that makes your heart sing. So again, in recovery circles, we talk about this as the top line behaviors, stuff that you only do just for you. So it might be painting or drawing that you do and you don't show anyone. You just do it because of the love of doing the drawing. Music to make, singing in the shower. But finding something that you don't know how to do well and just getting into it, enjoying it. And remembering, choose something that has a sense of play, a sense of lightness, or gives you that sense of joy, that sense of lightness. I remember talking to somebody about this top line behaviors, and I said, what's your top line behaviors? What are the things that make your heart sing? And he said to me, cleaning my car. I said, are you a car buff? And he was like, well, no, I feel satisfied when it's done. And I was like, yeah, maybe we look at something that's a little bit more just for you that makes you feel really happy. And he went, I love playing soccer. And I was like, there you go. It's that thing that makes you kind of go, I'm really excited about it. That'd be unreal. Or I'd love to learn that. I'd love to be able to do that. So that's where you want to look there. And another way is mess up on purpose. So find an activity that you're particularly perfectionistic with and go about doing it not 100%. And just see what happens. Notice what happens. Does the world fall apart? Do things, do giant arms come out of the sky and grab you and decapitate you, or does life go on? And so that's something really good to recognize. Like, what happens if it's not perfect? Like, is there any penalty? And again, John Nutting talks about this in one of his workshops about reclaiming personal power, that you should, it's like the finger in the light socket technique. if I test it, what's the reaction of this? Is there a reaction or is there no reaction? So that's a really good one to investigate as well. Mostly remember this, and this is something that my teacher said to me when I was in my brand new band after I came out of acting college, and she came and saw us, and she was standing on the side of stage after I came off, looking a little bit scared, and she goes, "Cam, can you go and ask your band a question?" And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And she goes, "Ask them why angels fly." And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Because they take themselves lightly." So if there's one thing I can share with you is, if your perfectionism is helping you feel uplifted, it's helping you fly, it's helping you enjoy new things with fervor and attention to detail, and if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. But if it's dragging you down, if it's making you feel heavy, if it's taking away from your quality of life, then just remember, why do angels fly? Because they take themselves lightly. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed that little exploration into perfectionism and the thief of natural joy and self-expression. And I hope you get in contact with the things that make your heart sing, and you get something out of this video. So yeah, if you've enjoyed it, come across to foundationmethod.com, and I've got a little free training webinar on there exploring the 6 biggest problems and 6 high quality solutions that took me most of my life to find, that stood between me and my accessing a real wellness and positive living well in my wellness journey, and I share that with you for free for just signing up to the mailing list. So, and if you like, I can also take you through the mentoring of the foundations of yoga and also the core belief balancing, and that's all on the website there. So hope I'll see you soon. Leave a comment, have a look in the comments for all the links of all the stuff that I've talked about today. Namaste, my name's Cam, and I hope to see you soon. Have a great day.